Imagine discovering that someone next to you may feel the world in a completely different way, and you would never notice. A mind that doesn't react to fear like yours, that doesn't feel guilt the way you do, that sees other people's emotions almost as if they were a foreign language. The question is, how is this possible? What exists inside this brain that rewrites such basic rules of human behavior? Today, you're going to understand what truly changes inside the mind of someone with psychopathic traits, and why this discovery can transform the way you interpret the people around you. We're going where almost no one goes, into the internal logic behind a mind that operates outside the usual patterns. This is the starting point. The real question here is not to identify who is a psychopath, but to understand what happens inside a mind that operates under rules so different from ours. In this video, we go beyond labels, beyond myths, and beyond popular caricatures. We will explore what science has already discovered, and what it still cannot explain, about why some people feel less fear, less guilt, and less emotional connection. The goal here isn't to create monsters, but to reveal how biological, emotional, and environmental factors shape a unique way of perceiving the world. You will understand what truly changes in the brain, how that influences behavior, and how these differences take shape over a lifetime. By the end, you won't just know what lies behind the psychopathic mind, you will also see human behavior through different eyes. Before understanding what changes in the brain, we need to know what we're really talking about when we use the word psychopathy. Because, contrary to what many imagine, it is not an official diagnosis, nor a label that a professional simply applies. Psychopathy is a set of traits, a pattern of emotional and behavioral functioning that deviates from what we consider typical. It involves superficial charm, emotional coldness, manipulation, impulsivity, not because the person wants to be like that, but because their way of feeling and responding to the world is different at the core. While some disorders are defined by evident symptoms, psychopathy reveals itself in the details, in the absence of guilt when others feel remorse, in the ease of breaking social rules without hesitation, in the ability to rationalize emotions that most people experience automatically. That's why specialists use specific scales and assessments to understand the degree of these traits. It is not a sentence, not a final label. It's an attempt to map how that mind works and why it reacts to the world that way. With that clear, we can move on to what really matters. What, inside the brain, creates such a unique way of existing? When we talk about psychopathy, one of the most striking points is the way these individuals feel, or fail to feel. It's not that emotions don't exist, they just appear with a different intensity, different speed, different depth. While most people react instinctively to fear, guilt, or someone else's suffering, individuals with psychopathic traits seem to operate under a kind of emotional silencing. What triggers an alert in us barely causes a ripple inside them. Threat doesn't press. Guilt doesn't weigh. The pain of others doesn't create that automatic wave of empathy. And that changes everything. Decisions become colder. Consequences feel more distant. Relationships become less about connection and more about utility. It's as if the emotional world has a different volume. Lower, more distant, almost always insufficient to guide choices. This reduced emotional impact isn't a mere personality quirk. It's the lens that redefines how every situation is interpreted. And when emotion ceases to be a natural break, behavior follows its own logic. More calculated, more detached, and sometimes more dangerous. Understanding this is essential to grasp the next step: how the brain creates this particular way of feeling the world. To understand the psychopathic mind, we need to abandon the idea of a lack of morality and look at something deeper, the internal logic that drives these decisions. People with psychopathic traits don't analyze situations based on emotional impact, but on utility. They don't ask, how does this make someone feel? But, what does this offer me? Or, what's the best move right now? It's a thought process that works almost like a constant calculation, where emotional bonds carry little weight, and social consequences seem too abstract to inhibit an action. That doesn't mean they are irrational. In fact, they are often extremely rational. They simply use a different reference point. Emotion, which is a compass for most people, is just a peripheral detail to them. This internal logic also explains why they can be so convincing. Without the emotional noise, they maintain clarity in situations where others hesitate. They may sound confident, articulate, assured, and they can use that to charm, manipulate, or simply navigate the world with more coldness than most people could tolerate. It's a way of thinking built not by choice, but by the very structure that supports this mind. And that structure begins to take shape when we look directly at the brain. When we reach biology, something important becomes clear. Psychopathy doesn't arise from a single point, but from a set of mechanisms that work differently, and two of them draw particular attention. The first is the amygdala, the structure that evaluates threats, triggers fear, and gives emotional weight to our choices. In people with psychopathic traits, this region is often smaller or less active. This explains why danger feels distant, why guilt doesn't press, and why another person's pain doesn't provoke that automatic response most people feel. The second is the orbitofrontal cortex, responsible for inhibiting impulses and weighing consequences. When this area functions atypically, impulsivity is looser, decisions become quicker, and the boundary between "I want" and "I'll do it" becomes thinner. These differences don't create monsters. They create configurations, minds that process emotions and risks with less intensity, and therefore build a different internal logic. And even so, none of these alterations works alone. The brain only prepares the terrain. What happens next depends on the environment the person grows up in, the experiences they live, and the responses they receive from the world. It's this combination, genetics, brain, and context, that shapes the trajectory. And it's exactly this that leads us to the next point: how these pieces fit together over a lifetime to form someone with psychopathic traits. Genetics and environment don't work as separate forces. They combine, amplify each other, and sometimes create fertile ground for something no one expects. Some people are born with real biological predispositions: lower emotional response, low sensitivity to fear, difficulty forming bonds. It's not fantasy, it's neurology. But predisposition is not destiny. What shapes the direction is the environment. A childhood marked by neglect, violence, or a total absence of affection can turn a trait into a scar. The brain learns that the world is hostile, that empathy is useless, that feeling is dangerous. And when vulnerable genetics meet a broken environment, the result can be a personality shaped by survival, cold, calculated, distant, not out of evil, but because that's how they learned to exist. But the opposite is also true. Some people with similar predispositions grow up in stable environments and develop healthy strategies. They don't become psychopaths. They never come close. The combination between what you are born with and what the world does to you determines the path. It's not simple. It's not predictable. It's a complex interplay between nature and nurture. And often it's at this crossroads that the mind of a psychopath begins to take shape. Not every psychopath becomes a criminal. Some learn to adapt so well that they go completely unnoticed. These are the so-called functional psychopaths, people who reach high positions, lead teams, make difficult decisions without losing sleep, and no one imagines what lies behind that almost artificial calm. They don't act on impulse. They are strategic. They calculate risks with surgical coldness. They know how to observe, identify weaknesses, understand human behavior as if it were a chessboard, and they use that to advance. Not through violence, but through advantage. The absence of empathy in this context becomes a tool. It helps them handle tension, pressure, conflict. They don't feel fear like most people. They don't freeze. They don't collapse. And precisely because of that, they can thrive in competitive environments where emotions are seen as weaknesses. But there's an important detail. Functional does not mean harmless. These individuals can manipulate relationships, drain people emotionally, and turn entire environments into silent power games. And they do it with a smile, with charm, with ease. The danger lies in the subtlety. They don't need to cause physical harm to create impact. They just need to push someone in the wrong direction, plant a doubt, move a piece at the right moment. And the most unsettling part is that, often, no one realizes they were dealing with a psychopath until it's too late. But there comes a point where everything changes. A moment when the coldness, once subtle, begins to leak through the cracks. It could be a disproportionate reaction, a strange silence, an expression that doesn't match the situation, something small, but revealing an abyss. That's where the turning point emerges, when you realize that this person doesn't feel like you feel, doesn't react like you would, doesn't interpret the world through the same emotional lens, and that realization alone is disturbing. Suddenly, the charm seems rehearsed, the confidence feels artificial, the calm becomes suspicious. Small signs accumulate, as if the mask is beginning to crack, not because they want it to, but because maintaining the illusion requires constant energy, strategy, and vigilance. And when that mask slips even for seconds, it becomes clear. You were never dealing with someone normal. You were dealing with someone who analyzed you, tested you, calculated you, someone who always held the control while you believed you were on equal footing. This is the turning point, the moment the game shifts, but you still don't know what their next move will be. When the mask falls, you finally realize something even more unsettling. It's not just a lack of empathy. It's an entire internal system that operates differently, a logic that functions like a precise, cold, deeply strategic machine. While most people make decisions balancing emotions, morality, and consequences, the psychopath sees only three variables: opportunity, risk, and advantage. Nothing else. There is no emotional weight, no moral hesitation. There is calculation, and that calculation is fast, silent, almost always imperceptible. That's why they blend in. That's why they appear confident. That's why they become leaders, perfect partners, incredibly understanding friends. They learn social patterns like learning a language, not because they feel it, but because mastering it gives them power. And the more you study this functioning, the more disturbing it becomes. Because psychopathy is not a monster hiding in dark alleys. Many times, it's in offices, companies, leadership roles, relationships. People who don't need to commit crimes to cause destruction. They only need to manipulate, drain, and discard. What's most frightening is not the violence. It's the emotional emptiness and the efficiency with which it is used. And when you understand this mental architecture, you start to see the world differently. You begin to notice how small traits can shape entire lives, and how some of them, when combined, create a mind capable of walking through the world without feeling the impact of their own actions. This is where the topic deepens. Psychopathy is not just a disorder. It's a psychological structure that reveals how far a human being can go when they don't carry the weight of conscience. And perhaps as you hear all this, a silent question is rising within you. Why does this matter for my life? Because understanding the mind of a psychopath is, in the end, understanding your own better. You interact with people every day. You make decisions every day. You trust, believe, give parts of yourself expecting the other person to do the same. But what if not everyone is playing the same game? What if some simply don't feel what you feel? This reflection is a powerful reminder. Your sensitivity, your empathy, your capacity to be affected, all the things that sometimes feel like weaknesses, are exactly what protect you. They're what keep you human, and this is where the shift happens. When you understand that it's not about fearing psychopaths, it's about recognizing the value of your conscience, your sense of right and wrong, your ability to care. Deep down, knowing someone else's darkness helps you see the light that exists within you, a light many try to dim, but that is exactly what sets you apart. Because in the end, the question isn't, how do they think, but what do you decide to do with what you've just discovered? In the end, understanding the mind of a psychopath isn't about diving into fear. It's about clarity. It's about seeing the world without illusions, about knowing that not everyone feels, perceives, or connects the way you do. And from that, making more conscious choices. Because when you recognize who is truly by your side, who affects you, who influences you, you regain control of your own life. You stop being guided and start guiding. You stop being a target and become the author. So take this with you. Your empathy is a power. Your capacity to feel is a strength. And your conscience, that voice that insists, that weighs, that guides, is what keeps you whole in a world where some walk without feeling anything. Now that you've seen what exists on the other side, the question that remains is simple. What will you do with this new clarity? If this video made you think, then don't let that fade here. Take the next step. Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications to continue this journey with us. And if someone came to mind while you were watching, share the video. It might be exactly what that person needs to hear today.